There comes a moment when love grows tired of being a struggle, when the body no longer trembles with absence, and the mind, at last, surrenders to the silence that follows the cry. It is in that space, fragile, empty, almost imperceptible, that love begins to stop hurting, not because something was resolved, but because something dissolved. Like a drop returning to the ocean without protest. When love stops hurting, it is not a sign of victory, but of the soul's maturity. It is the point where the heart realizes that its pain was not only for the other, but for its own resistance to letting life flow as it is. The human being has a strange tendency to confuse intensity with depth. We love until we tear ourselves apart, believing that the more we suffer, the truer the feeling is. But perhaps love does not need to be a consuming flame. Perhaps it is simply the quiet warmth of a candle that never goes out. The pain of love is often the price we pay for trying to possess it, for believing the other exists to fill the emptiness we refuse to face within ourselves. When possession falls away, love changes form. It becomes presence. There is no longer mine or yours. There is only the movement of life loving through us. When love still hurts, it is because someone is still trying to control it, trying to hold the wind in their hands. But love is like the wind, visible only through its effects, impossible to contain. To love truly is to accept the impermanence of all that is born. It is to allow the other to exist freely, even if that means no longer having them. Pain is the friction between what is and what we wanted it to be. When love stops hurting, it is because wanting has finally grown tired and being takes its place. Most people believe that love dies when the feeling cools, but what dies is expectation. What disappears is the desire for love to follow the script we imagined. True love does not die, it merely changes its language. It expresses itself through silence, through memory, through learning, through the lightness of moving on without resentment. It continues, but not as fire as light. There comes a moment when the heart stops asking and simply begins to observe. That is when love becomes pure, because to love without needing anything in return is the highest act of freedom a human being can offer. And pain finally transforms into gratitude. When love stops hurting, it's because the I that insisted on being loved has begun to disappear. Suffering always belongs to the image we've created of ourselves, the character who believes they must be seen, remembered, desired. But when that image starts to dissolve, what remains is something vaster, quieter, more real. We discover that love was never between me and you. It was always the very fabric of existence, vibrating through two temporary forms. When one of those forms fades, love doesn't vanish, it simply changes direction. The mistake lies in believing that love is a relationship. Love is a state of being, and as long as you believe that love depends on someone, you will always be bound to the pain of losing it. Freedom begins when you realize that love is not in anyone, but through everything. Love is the space that allows the meeting, not the bond that holds. It has no owner because it has no fixed form. It flows through the hands that let it go. But the mind fears emptiness. It craves guarantees, promises, eternities. It cannot comprehend that love is like the tide, coming, going, and beautiful, precisely because it cannot be explained. Love only hurts when we turn it into a contract, when we make it an identity, a refuge, a meaning. The mind cries, without the other, who am I? And that question is the true center of pain. For love, when seen as possession, is merely the attempt to perpetuate the self through another body. When you understand this, you begin to laugh at your old seriousness. You realize that every sorrow was, in truth, an act of attachment to what never existed solidly. You cried for a story, not for a truth. What was lost was never love, only the character who performed it. And love, freed from that role, returns to what it always was, a silent field of presence, a current of energy that needs no name. When love stops hurting, time changes too. The past is no longer a burden, the future no longer a hope. Everything condenses into now. In this moment, you breathe and feel life pulsing through every atom without demand, without drama, without condition. Absence ceases to be lack and becomes space. Silence ceases to be emptiness and becomes peace, and you realize that the love you sought outside was merely waiting for your own disappearance to reveal itself fully. When love stops hurting, consciousness awakens to something that was once hidden behind emotion. It discovers that love has always been a mirror, and that every pain merely reflected the shadows we still refuse to see. Every disappointment, every abandonment, every rejection was, in truth, a revelation. The other never truly hurt us, they simply revealed where we still hope to be saved. Because deep down, the pain of love is the longing to feel whole through someone else, and that, inevitably, fails. But that failure is not the end, it is the beginning of true love, for only when the mirror shatters do we see beyond the image. Mature love is not a feeling that burns, but a clarity that illuminates. It seeks neither possession nor persuasion nor reciprocation, it simply is. It arises as a silent understanding that everything that happens between two people is a reflection of the cosmic dance between being and nothingness, between giving and dissolving. While love still hurts, it remains trapped in personal history. I loved, I lost, I suffered. But when consciousness expands, it sees that love never belonged to a biography. It is life itself, experiencing itself through infinite forms. Just as the ocean creates waves that rise and fall without ceasing to be the ocean, love creates meetings and partings that come and go, but the depth remains serene. The human mind, however, seeks stability. It wants love to be a harbor. But love is not a harbor, it is the sea. And those who try to anchor themselves in it will drown. To love is to learn to navigate without a map, without a compass, without a promise. It is to accept that the direction changes at every moment, and that the tide obeys forces far greater than will. When love stops hurting, you begin to trust this invisible movement, and that trust becomes the very definition of faith. Not faith in someone, but faith in the intelligence of the flow. In time, you realize that love is not in contradiction with pain, it includes it. Pain is not an error, it is a teacher. It is how life shows where there is still rigidity, where there is still fear. When love becomes consciousness, even pain is welcome, because it shows that you are still alive, still capable of feeling, still learning to open your heart without demanding return. And this is where true compassion arises. Not that distant pity, but the compassion that comes from knowing we are all trying to love with the tools we have. That no one is a villain, no one a saint, just momentary expressions of the same longing for unity. When love stops hurting, forgiveness happens naturally, effortlessly, without the need for words. You simply understand. And that understanding is liberation. When love stops hurting, silence becomes the purest language between you and existence. There is no longer any need to explain what you feel or to translate what was lived. Words, once desperate attempts to hold on to the fleeting, now seem too small before the vastness that remains. Love ceases to be a story and becomes a state of presence. It no longer wants to prove anything, nor to fix the past. It simply observes, tenderly, all that was and gives thanks for having burned. It's curious how the human mind confuses the end of pain with the end of love, but what truly ends is not love, it's the drama. It's the stage where the ego played the wounded, the betrayed, the savior. When the fire of passion burns out, what remains is not ash, but fertile soil. The heart, finally cleansed of illusion, becomes a space where life can bloom again, unafraid. To love, then, is no longer an act of need but of abundance. You no longer love to fill something you love because you are overflowing. And in that overflow, the world changes color. Everything that once seemed ordinary, the wind, the laughter, the touch, the light on the wall, begins to reveal a silent beauty. You realize that love was never trapped in people. It was always in the way you looked at them. Love doesn't live in someone, it lives in the consciousness that sees, and for that reason, it cannot be lost. It moves, transforms, reinvents itself, but never dies. The love that doesn't hurt is the one that has learned to die many times, that has accepted losing everything, even its own form, to discover what cannot be destroyed. It is the love that has walked through the fire and found that, at the center of the flame, there was only light, no fear, no lack, no demand, only a living stillness that needs no explanation. When love reaches that point, it doesn't ask for reciprocity, but for presence. It doesn't want to be special, it wants to be true. There is something profoundly human in the silence that follows pain. It is the moment when you realize that love, in its essence, is indestructible. It is the very energy that makes you breathe, that moves the tides, that pulses in the stars. When love stops hurting, the entire universe seems to breathe with you. And for the first time, you understand what it means to be at peace, not because everything went right, but because there is finally no more resistance to anything. When love stops hurting, it returns to its natural state, pure consciousness. There are no longer boundaries between the one who loves and the one who is loved. Everything becomes the same breath. You begin to feel that love is the very pulse of the universe, moving through every form, every gaze, every silence. And what you once called I dissolves like a drop returning to the ocean. It is the return home, the home that was never lost, only forgotten. In this state, love is no longer emotion, nor desire, nor memory. It is perception, the clear seeing that everything that exists is in harmony, even when it appears chaotic. Pain, pleasure, beginning, end, all are part of the same dance. And at last, you stop trying to lead it. You let life carry you, time shape you, love teach you, without promising anything. This is the freedom that cannot be achieved, only recognized because it was always here, hidden behind the fear of loss. The love that doesn't hurt is the love that understands that nothing belongs to us, yet everything passes through us. To love is to allow life to move through you without trying to hold it. It is to say yes to the flow even when it carries away what you most wanted to keep. It is to understand that every meeting is a miracle and every farewell an initiation. Mature love knows that everything that comes also goes and still remains open, because the beauty lies exactly there, in feeling fully without demanding permanence. And when that perception settles in, the world changes texture. What once seemed separation becomes unity. You look at people and see yourself in each of them, the same longing for peace, the same search for meaning, the same fear of vanishing. And in that recognition, true compassion is born, loving the other not for what they give, but for seeing them as part of the same totality that you are. Love then ceases to be a personal story and becomes a living prayer, a gesture of gratitude for simply existing. Pain has done its work. It shattered the mirror, tore the veil, destroyed the illusion of separation. Now, everything is simple. The wind blows, the sun sets, the heart beats, and that is enough. When love stops hurting, what remains is not emptiness. It is the whole, the same whole that was there from the beginning, waiting for you to stop fighting, stop searching, stop trying to understand. And when you finally stop, when silence surrounds you and time disappears, there is only this, a pure instant of being. A moment where nothing is missing because love, at last, has returned to what it has always been,